Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. We appreciate you taking time to join our panel event, and I can promise you will come away with some excellent thoughts on how digital transformation can and should impact your organization. My name is Patrick Vardeman. I'm the CEO of Accudata Systems, an IT consultancy that focuses on helping our customers secure, modernize, and grow with the help of leading-edge technology. I'm going to be your moderator today, and I'm excited to be here. Before I introduce our excellent panel, I want to cover a few housekeeping items. We'll be taking live questions at the end of today's panel discussion, so feel free to submit those questions during our session today. I'll do my best to ensure we get all of your questions, but if not, we'll personally address those via email after today's event. The session will also be available on demand an hour upon completion, and you'll receive a post-event email linking the on-demand session as well. So without delay, I'd like to introduce your expert panel that's going to be with us today, and we'll start with Rick Snyder. Rick is the Senior Vice President of Cisco's partner organization. Rick, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Well, first off, Patrick, thanks so much for having me. I'm delighted to be here. I lead the Cisco Americas Partner Sales Organization. So I've got responsibility for all partner activity, enablement, and their evolution on this side of the globe. So I cover Canada, the US, and Latin America. Prior to Cisco, and I've been with Cisco about 9 years, I led a business called Tandberg in the Americas. So delighted to be here, and thanks for having me.
Oh, Rick, we're excited to have you here. Next, I'd like to introduce to you Anoj Willy, the CEO of Xentaurs. Anoj, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and Xentaurs?
Thanks, Patrick. Yep, glad to be here. So prior to founding Xentaurs, I worked for a firm called Mantworks, which was dubbed Think Do Tank by its founder, Patrick Soon-Shiong. And so I worked in the venture capital market in the genomic space. And then I built practices for VARs, digital practices, before then founding Xentaurs, which is focused on DevOps, cloud, and analytics. But our real strength is building these practices for other partners and helping them attain relevance in the digital era.
Great, thanks, Anoj. Last, I'd like to introduce Vid Sista. Vid's our Vice President of Digital Transformation with Accudata Systems. Vid, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and Accudata?
Sure, thanks, Patrick. I've been in the IT industry for the past 25 years in various roles, primarily focusing on IT infrastructure and security. And really my role is just helping organizations, whether they're small or large, try to identify what some of their business challenges are and figure out what's the right architecture and technology to help them to address those challenges. So really excited to be here to talk about digital transformation.
Great, thanks, Vid, and thanks everybody for joining. So why don't we jump in? Our goal today is to paint the landscape of digital transformation, not only how it applies specifically to IT departments, but also how it unfolds across an organization and leads to vast opportunities for growth and competitive advantage. So for our first question, I'd like to direct this over to Anoj. We're going to look at market indicators that digital transformation is really happening. Rick, we're going to actually start with you, and then we'll let our other presenters jump in. So let's focus on the vastness of digital transformation. Break it down, clarify. What is really happening, and what does it mean? It's not just a buzzword, is it?
It is not just a buzzword. It's happening each and every day. And just some indices, IDC, a large leading third-party provider consultancy, says that digital spending in 2018 will reach $3.7 trillion. It's huge, right? And you don't have to look far to see digital examples everywhere. When you think about companies that are built on digital foundations and you look at their market capitalizations, you compare Netflix to Walt Disney, one would think that Walt Disney's a much larger business, and in fact, in revenue it is. But when you look at the capitalization, what the market values Netflix at compared to Disney, Netflix is roughly $170 billion in market capitalization, while Disney has been trading at about $160 billion in market cap. So legacy content entertainment company that is looking like a digital company or trying to be a digital company, and a pure form digital platform company in Netflix is viewed as really more valuable company. So it's happening, and you don't have to look far to see examples.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I know when you hear digital transformation, what does it really mean to you?
So I think we're entering into a new industrial revolution, right? And if you look at the World Economic Forum, they actually term this the fourth industrial revolution, whereas the first three were kind of a linear scale. The fourth is an exponential scale. You now see startups really bubbling up in every nook and cranny of the ecosystem, providing digital services. And so in 2017, just to key off what Rick was saying, we saw the most amount of VC money being globally invested, right? About 150 billion. But just going away from the stats, like forget the stats, just in daily life, look at what we're seeing. I'm willing to bet you've got more mobile devices at home than you did 10 years ago, right? And if I ask the question, how many of you take your phones to bed with you? We'd probably all raise our hands here. We're connected to a computer that if you lose it or it even runs out of battery, you actually panic, right? This is not what we used to do 10 years ago. So this generation here has seen the real rise of digital and how it affects us in our day-to-day life. Taking it from a company perspective, if you take some of these companies, there's the co-founder of Evite, Josh Silverman, talks about the rise of cloud computing and how when he had to raise funds around 135 million to really start Evite, how many engineers, it took him about 4 or 5 years to really take that product to market. He said he'd need about 1/10 of that today, 1/10 of the time, 1/10 of the engineering power, and 1/10 of even the money he had to raise. And that is because of one of the digital innovations, which is cloud computing. So we're really seeing this shift now, and digital is allowing us to really get into the market more quickly and deliver value to customers more quickly. If you are a company and you don't have a website, you do not exist to a millennial, right? And now that's gone a step further. If you don't have an application or a mobile app, you may not exist, or you may not have that interaction you want for millennials or new customers. So this is what we're seeing with digital, and it is really hitting every facet of the economy.
So this is really interesting to me. So Rick, Cisco clearly is a leader in this space and has a great heritage in the technology space in general. But, I think you would agree, this is new for Cisco. It's new for IT departments embracing digital transformation. How is Cisco helping customers understand how digital transformation applies to their specific business cases?
Well, it's a great question. And first and foremost, we're developing products and solutions that help customers really deliver business outcomes to their stakeholders. And, we look at it, and our platform is one that delivers really a digital and very secure platform for business. And, we grew up in the networking space, but we realized that we had to reinvent networking because back in the day, it was a PC connecting to the internet. And today, it's sensors, it's human beings, it's wearable clothing, right? So what was on the network yesterday is still there, but it's increasing at an exponential rate. So that level of connectivity requires a new level of automation, a new level of analytics, a new level of security, and Cisco's providing all of that. Also, back in the day, we didn't, cloud was, not a term that we knew, and today we're embracing a multi-cloud environment. We know about the public cloud environments like AWS, and Azure, and Google, just to name a few. And we realize that customers, enterprise customers, big and small, need to really navigate across those cloud environments, and we're helping them with that with a variety of software and automation tools. we also realize that at the end of the day, customers and employees want to connect to this digital experience. And so we've grown up and done a lot of work in many years with collaboration. And so we've integrated that collaboration architecture with this digital platform, enabling a strong connection, a better customer experience, a better employee experience. So when it's all said and done, we feel we've got a leading solution set in the marketplace, and we've retooled the way we've trained our sellers, so that we're actually focusing more on business outcomes. We're partnering not just with our traditional resellers, but we're partnering with complementary partner types like Xentaurs and the work he's doing, and Anoj is doing, so that we can bring new skill sets to those partners, skill sets that they may not have had. They grew up in the networking world. And so now it's DevOps, it's analytics, it's big data. These are practice domains that they need to grow in, and even security, for example. So we've got the solution set, we're enabling the partner community and helping that partner community evolve to a digital future as well. And it's a very heavy lift, but we're up to the task.
No, I know you guys are. Vid, this is what's interesting to me. And, Accudata has been in business for 36 years now. And so we've seen a lot of these transformations over the years in terms of technology. And one of the things that's really interesting about cloud, and Rick, you mentioned this just a minute ago, was, cloud came on the scene, and I think there was a lot of tire kicking, and it didn't really take off. And then in the last few years, it really took off. And what I think scares some people is, well, but we're not, some huge organization. We're not Amazon, we're not Apple. Do we really need to embrace cloud, or do we really need to embrace digital transformation? And so, Vid, I guess a good question I want to pass over to you is, what if a customer isn't a large, multinational like an Amazon, applying, how can any organization look to digital transformation strategies and apply those in their own business?
No, that's a great question. And the good news is you don't have to be a startup based in Silicon Valley to engage in digital transformation. And I've actually got a story that will illustrate my point. I was actually presenting to a group of high school seniors at KIPP High School here in Houston, talking about careers in IT, and the topic of digital transformation came up. And I challenged them to come up with any kind of industry that they could think of where technology didn't apply. And they thought for a while, and they thought they had stumped me by coming up with the business use case of selling candy in the hallways to other students. And so I thought for a while, for a few minutes, and I said, okay, well, let me think about it. And what if we applied technology in this manner? I said, what about your payment, right? What if your students and customers don't have cash? What if you adopted things like using Venmo or PayPal to be able to accept credit cards, or using Square to accept credit cards on your mobile device? The second thing I looked at is, what if you could look at the Wi-Fi signals and beaconing technology to identify traffic patterns, to figure out what hallways you need to stand in that's going to have the most amount of traffic for your students to sell your candy to? And then thirdly, what if you use digital marketing to be able to tell your students where you're going to be and when, and be able to provide things like location services or GPS so they can find you to increase that customer service? Then we talked about, what if you have a mobile app and you have rewards to get, the candy that's like the flavor nobody wants, to get that off of your shelf. So, and the list just went on and on. The more we started talking about it, and I provided these ideas, they started coming up with ideas that they hadn't thought of. So, if a high school student that's selling candy in the hallways between classes can come up with a use case for digital transformation, that just illustrates that any organization can come up with similar types of ideas on how to do it. And sometimes all it takes is, finding the right person to come in and look at your business model and be able to provide you with some of those ideas to help you get started.
That's an excellent example of how you can apply digital. That's a great story. I want to, now that we've broken down what digital transformation is, I want to dive a little bit deeper into helping organizations identify where to start that journey. And to Vid's answer just a second ago, it's kind of interesting. I think many organizations, especially larger organizations, struggle with thinking, that's more of an entrepreneurial approach to my business, and my business is built, it's established. We've got processes. We're already in the market. But they're hearing this. They're hearing and they're seeing their competition apply and digital to their business. So I think the journey is where people tend to struggle. So first question, Anoj, is over to you. Where should an organization start that journey? If I'm a CIO or if I'm an IT director and I feel like my organization should embrace technology and be a partner in the boardroom versus just somebody in the hallway who's not engaged with the business, how do I bridge that gap? How do I start that journey within my organization?
Yeah, so first I got to tip my hat to Vid. He's helping disrupt the high school hustle over there with digital. And in a very similar way, actually, we need to start with the use case, right? What is the business use case that we're going for? We talk a lot about this. You hear this term business outcome get thrown around a lot, but what does that really mean? And how do you peel back the layers to make it effective and execute on that, right? So the first thing we really start with leaders is, what is that business use case? Do I want to deliver changes to an application quickly? Do I want to go after a specific market segment? What does that market segment want? And how do I deliver features to that market segment? When we dealt with technology, we tended to go after the features, right? Because the business outcome thing had already been decided. And then by the time it got to IT, it was, hey, just figure out how to make this work. And then so IT was left to sort of figure out, okay, what box do I want? What features do I want out of an application versus how do I really drive this business outcome? And I'll give you a personal example I had. So while running at VC, I ran the cloud and high performance computing environments, and we hired, a consulting firm, and they came in and their first question was, hey, let's go and interview all 40 business units you had, that's how many we had, and gather all the requirements. And off the top of that, you knew, well, that's tough because a lot of these folks don't know what they want because they don't know what's capable, right? And B, if they did know what they want, they can't articulate it to you in technology terms, right? Which is the way we were asking the question. And so what happened was they came back and they said, okay, Anoj, you've got to develop these 300 services. And on the face of that, you knew that was an exercise in failure. And the way I think about it is when you're delivering services, you're delivering an experience. You're not delivering a bunch of features, right? We don't go to a restaurant because it has the most items on the menu. Like, hey, let's go to Cheesecake Factory. They just added 2 more pages. That's not the conversation. You go there for specific experience, whether it's fine dining or fast food or buffet, whatever that is. And so we really have to start with the use case and the experience, and then align the leaders around that. One of the biggest risks we see is if the leaders are not aligned around what the use case is and the outcome, everybody else is left to fight bloody, unwinnable battles, right? And so this is typically what happens. And then we end up in this sort of analysis paralysis mode where there's tons of technology hitting us from all kinds of vendors. And we have a hard time choosing, what box, what widget, what feature versus, hey, what's that experience? Let's drive to that experience. Let's get a small win, get some feedback from our customers and our users, and then iterate quickly. And then we actually get into a services mode, right? So maybe I launch 2 or 3 services. I get some feedback on that. If maybe 1 or 2 of those work, 1 might fail, that's fine. But after that feedback, I can then develop what my next set of features are and then keep adding those services to the list. And that's how you can eventually get to a full enriched list of services. But it is really start with 1 or 2 use cases, get those small wins, and iterate quickly.
Anoj, it's really interesting the way you frame that up, because one of the things, and I know you and I had spoken with a customer not too long ago, and one of the things that struck me was they were in the healthcare space, was being able to respond also to the manufacturers, like Cisco, the manufacturers who are already adopting this model. And in that particular case, we had a large health system that runs a large electronic medical records application and is used to kind of the old way of doing things. So we're going to get 1 iterative update a year. It's going to be this major project. We're going to get, we're going to throw thousands of dollars at it. We're going to have a ton of resources. We're going to bring in outside parties to help us. And we're going to prepare. We're going to sit down and we're going to prepare for this big upgrade. And that manufacturer now is saying, hey, we're going to start rolling out quarterly releases and we're going to do monthly iterative updates just routinely. And it kind of threw them on their heels. So part of the challenge is also internally, trying to drive the journey yourself, but also responding to the suppliers that make your business run. And so I'm going to shift over to one of those suppliers named Cisco. So Cisco, weigh in, or Rick, weigh in on this. Cisco, I know, because we see in a lot of the applications now that you've developed, you're on this kind of agile, iterative update, quick response. We're going to try to add features as we go. What's Cisco's perspective on this, and how customers should kind of look at this fast IT model?
We're seeing it, right? We're feeling it. And agility is absolutely key. Simplicity is absolutely key. We gained a market share leadership position with networking over the years based on something called CLI, command line interface language. And that's all well and good, but let's face it, customers today demand a level of responsiveness and agility and flexibility. And there's also a level of thinking around it's good enough. It'll get the job done. So with that, we have truly reinvented our networking schemes. The level of automation with our new Catalyst 9K with DNA Center has brought about just that, a level of automation, a level of programmability, the kind of programmability that customers are demanding for flexibility, responsiveness, partitioning of networks. It's required. It's absolutely required. And so that's what we're doing, and we're applying that level of thinking in all of our product development. We realize we have to. It's just this generation of technology, and it's going to continue that way for the foreseeable future.
Right. And Rick, you made an interesting comment there around, getting technology out that's good enough. And that, I think that's somewhat scary to some IT professionals. So Anoj, I'm going to kind of flip back over to you. What do you see are big mistakes, or the biggest mistakes that organizations make when trying to undertake these digital transformation initiatives?
So I'd say the two biggest mistakes I have seen are, one, starting with the technology and only focusing on the technology. And it's easy to get caught up in that, right? Because, so today, big buzzword you hear about is containers, serverless, which always makes me laugh because something is running on a processor somewhere. But, and it's easy to get kind of caught and start to look at, hey, I want to go containers and let me look at all the different container options that are out there, right? Versus what are we really trying to accomplish? Like, what is this going to look like before and after a deployment of this type, right? So if you think about it, before, when I'd go off and I'd be like, hey, we upgraded all the servers. Well, what did that mean to an executive, right? That they didn't really care. That was what we call parity work. So there's a bunch of parity work that has to happen, which is, if you do email better than the next hospital provider, it doesn't make you more competitive, right, than that hospital provider. Of course, if your email is going down every 3 days, that's a problem, right? So you have to have that at least in parity with everybody else, right? And so that's not something that you're going to invest a ton of time and money into. You really want to be able to siphon down, or there's a bunch of incompressible hours though in that parity work, right? But every hour spent in parity is an hour I'm not spending in market differentiation, right? So one of the first things you really want to find out, and the mistakes we see, is people starting with that technology side versus what's that outcome, and more than what's the outcome, can I quantify that outcome, right? And what does that mean for the people using that, right? What does this mean for a developer or an analyst or a data scientist, sort of before and after my project? And if you can do that, then you can really drive this alignment. What we're seeing that's different from yesterday to today's technology is the amount of people that it actually takes to drive a solution. Before, I could go to an IT director and kind of wrap a whole solution with them. And maybe under that IT director, I had network and storage and compute. Sure. Now I've got to talk to not only that IT director, but the VP of applications. I got to understand the data. And so I have to align a lot more people around the solution. And, people are probably the hardest machines to upgrade, right? So the first thing is you got to spend a lot of time with them. They reject a lot of the upgrades, by the way. We left.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
So you got to really spend a lot of time with the stakeholders, identifying the use case, and then driving that down to their level. And I'd say that is the number one mistake we see. It's not driving that alignment up front, starting a project. And this is why we see a lot of projects sort of peter out or die kind of halfway. The second one is driving adoption. We've all been part of a company that had a wiki or a SharePoint that was built and never used, right? And that wasn't because technically it wasn't built correctly. It's because we didn't change the experience enough to drive that adoption, right? When you're talking about services, you're not talking about speeds and feeds anymore. I'm not talking about features. I am talking purely about adoption and the velocity of adoption. And that's where people have to focus.
No, it's a very interesting point. And Vid, I want to shift over to you because clearly, as a service provider in the technology space, we deal with customers large and small. We work with them routinely in different projects that impact their business. What are you seeing in your experience with these types of projects? Are you seeing that most companies are looking at it with the appropriate kind of broad strategic lens? Or is the focus typically too narrow and maybe not fully thought out? And in that they're approaching it maybe like a traditional project in the old way versus this new kind of fast, agile way. Hey, Vid, I think you're on mute, actually.
Sorry.
There you go.
I think the nature of most organizations is that they have a narrow view and a departmental focus just because they're set up in departments. Each department's going to look at how do they operate, what are the metrics they're measuring, what are their goals, what are they trying to achieve. And the problem is a digital transformation has to be an organization-wide effort. And I agree 100% with Anoj that you have to get alignment across the organization in order to be successful. Because part of the digital transformation component is automating those processes across the departments or gathering information and data and breaking down those silos and connecting all the different components. And I think really where the struggle is that getting that top-down vision and understanding what the outcome is, as Anoj mentioned, that if you don't know what the vision and the end goal is, and you're only focusing on the technology or how it affects you individually or within your department, you're not really going to be successful. Now, that's not to say that you can't have some type of a digital transformation within your own department or try to automate processes within your own department. But for something that's going to be impactful and really be a market differentiator against your competitors in the market, you've got to have something that is a vision that's top down throughout the organization on what the end goal is.
What's interesting about that, Vid, is I was literally today, had a lunch appointment with a client, a VP of IT, and the discussion centered around this disconnect, though, that can occur within the organization between IT and between the different lines of business. And we got into this interesting discussion around budget and where budgets are coming from. And one of the challenges, this is a pretty large company, one of the challenges is the users are, they're used to their personal experience. They're used to the experience that they have in their personal lives. And they want that same functionality in the office. And when IT departments struggle with delivering those services, what do? They go out and they find it themselves. So I guess one question for you is, are you seeing in your experiences, IT departments struggle with that, and that budget dollars are now coming from more of the lines of business, maybe the head of marketing, head of HR, to try to address a particular need, and just, go about it, or go around, I guess would be a better way to put it, IT.
Yeah, absolutely. I think one of the challenges right now is that, IT budgets are kind of shrinking. And as Anoj mentioned, it's kind of the, keeping the lights on. And that's really where IT is seen as, keep the infrastructure running, keep the lights on. But they're looking at other departments and business units for revenue driving functions. And so the budgets are really there. So the applications and the things that are customer touching and customer facing are really where the budgets are. And so IT's got to line up with the business units and understand what are they trying to accomplish and what are their initiatives and what are they trying to do, and really make sure that if they want to be helping the business units to achieve those goals and tap into some of those budgets and initiatives, they've got to focus on what is the business unit trying to achieve, not necessarily kind of focusing on the technologies that keep the lights on. And I think Anoj hit on the head when he said that, every dollar spent and every hour spent focusing on keeping the lights on is an hour and a dollar that's not spent on innovating and becoming more competitive in the market. So IT has definitely got to align with the business units to be able to stay relevant.
Yeah, it's interesting. This particular customer mentioned to me that within his organization, 90% of the effort is driven right now around operations, and only 10% is driven around innovation. But they're trying to flip that. They're trying to make that change. So it's a great point. So Vid, I kind of want to stick with you on this because we've talked about the what is digital transformation, then we've jumped into, okay, where do we start the journey? I want to move now to, the strategy. How do we identify what the importance is of strategy over picking maybe the next technology? Because there's a lot of technology that companies can look to help them in the space. But when that time comes, how do you make those decisions, right? How do you make those decisions on choosing the best infrastructure or applications to support whatever that initiative may be? So Vid, to you, what technologies help IT move at the same pace as developers?
Sure. And that's a tough question because there's so many startups in this space and cloud solutions that are available now, kind of promising the easy button. And the reality is there's not necessarily one technology. But I think where IT should start is understanding the pace and the requirements of what their developers and their business units are trying to achieve, and where are the bottlenecks within IT. Now, once you've done that, there's a proven method that we've used to kind of map the technology selection back to the business requirements versus just comparing two products, right? This product A has more bells and whistles than product B, and doing that in a vacuum. And that's really the mistake that we often see, is that they're comparing feature by feature versus first identifying what are the requirements, what's the outcome, and then finding the product that meets those requirements. And actually, Anoj can elaborate a little bit more on that methodology. But one of the things that we do in that process is also look at existing vendors and technologies, things that you already own. And as Rick mentioned, Cisco is the network vendor of choice in a lot of organizations, and a lot of customers have made that investment in the choice with Cisco. Well, Cisco's actually made a lot of investments in acquisitions and R&D, in specifically around automation and analytics, to add to their product portfolio. I would point to things like the Clicker acquisition, or App Dynamics, or DNA. So Rick can probably elaborate a little bit more on that, but some of the vendors you're used to today have made advancements that you should look at.
Yeah, so Rick, I'll pass the ball over to you. That's a great point. Cisco, is innovating, but they're also seeing in the market, technologies that they can bolt on, enhance, and bring and deliver to their customers. Speak to Cisco's acquisition strategy. Where are some solutions and acquisitions at a high level that you feel like, and markets, I should say, that you feel like Cisco's very interested in?
Sure. Innovation is a key thrust at Cisco, and we look at it a number of different ways. We can build it, we can buy it, we can co-develop it, we can partner to deliver it. And if you look at our history around buying and acquisitions over the last 25 years, we've acquired over 200 companies now. In the last 24 months, we've done exactly 24 acquisitions. And to Vid's point, those acquisitions are in areas like analytics, artificial intelligence, security, and so forth. And so, with a fairly decent cash position of over $60 billion, we're in a position to be able to look at technologies that are out there and really what our customers are asking for, and really go get those and acquire that technology, acquire that innovation. To Vid's point, a couple of them are things like App Dynamics, where they were actually going to do an IPO, and we kind of went in before they went IPO and acquired them for $3.7 billion. Clicker was really a leading company providing cloud orchestration, cloud automation capabilities, helping companies kind of navigate in a multi-cloud environment. We acquired that about 2-3 years ago. We just acquired a company called Duo, which is all about authentication, right? Company you guys probably know pretty well in your space. Spent over $2 billion on that. In just the last couple of weeks, that deal's not actually closed yet. We've acquired some boutique technologies in the area of artificial intelligence to really insert those into our existing collaboration portfolio, because we see what's happening with AI, right? We're seeing how voice recognition, artificial intelligence, machine learning are becoming increasingly important. So we're on it. We feel like we're in an enviable position. We've got a fairly robust capability in that respect, and we're blessed to have the cash position to be able to do some of the things we're doing.
No, that's great. And we're coming up on close to the top of the hour, but Anoj, I want to go to you just real quickly for one more question before we take questions from the audience. And that is, you know, we obviously partner with Xentaurs. We've done some projects with you. We work closely with you. Can you just describe a little bit the method to the madness around helping IT organizations select the right tools? Because I think that's important too.
Yeah, absolutely. So going back to, you know, some of the things I think we've all been talking about here is business outcomes, really defining that use case, right? Whether you're hustling in a high school hallway or all the way and delivering, you know, value to the marketplace in a variety of different ways. Once you found out that use case, you really need to now dial it down to technology. Technology is important. You have to pick a horse. You know, and you see Cisco, you know, one thing I've got to add, not only does Cisco develop some amazing technology and acquire it, the other leg in that stool, in my opinion, is they partner very, very well with other technology companies, right? Gone are the days where some company can come in and say, hey, I own your entire data center strategy, or I own your entire data strategy, right? You have to partner with this ecosystem. And Cisco's done a phenomenal job of doing that, of bringing in folks, you know, like NVIDIA, et cetera, and partnering with these kind of up and coming pioneers, right, to deliver an ecosystem of solutions. And so we use a process called verb noun. The verbs are the things that I want to do. The nouns are the products on what are doing them, right? And it's a combination of a lot of different technologies. And the way we talk about it is, you know, I'm sure we've all bought Lego before, right? Whether for ourselves or someone else. And on the top of, in front of the Lego box is a nice picture, but you open it up and it's a bunch of pieces. Luckily for us, though, there's a guidebook in there that shows you how to put those pieces together. Now, if you didn't have that guidebook, you might sort of get that together over time. But we're talking about a $50 Lego kit, right? Not a $10 million solution. So the risk profile, obviously, when you're building a data center or you're building, you know, a digital platform is much higher. And so we use this process to really map it down and build that digital Lego manual for a customer to make sure that they're putting those pieces together properly. You know, ultimately what we really talk to CIOs about is don't be the chief infrastructure officer. You need to be the chief information officer. The time is right now for IT to really have a seat at the table, right? And with business executives and have this conversation, because they're the ones who are going to govern the information that is coming to the organization and figure out how to dissect it and how best to make decisions on that. And we are in the information age. So it's a perfect time right now to be a CIO.
That's a great way to wrap up, Anoj. Thank you very much. So we're going to go ahead and shift over to questions. I want to thank all of you for the excellent input. This was fantastic. Hopefully, we've accomplished the goal we set out to achieve, which was to dissect digital transformation and help you understand where you as an organization, where your investment can have the greatest payoff. And with that, we're going to open it up to some attendee questions. So I've got those right here. And the first one, I'm going to direct Vid over to you and Rick. So this is from an IT director. I'm an IT director today, and right now I have zero visibility into our corporate strategy on digital transformation. How can I get involved? So Vid, you want to start, and then maybe Rick chime in?
Sure, that's a great question. I would say to start off talking to your IT leadership team and ask them what their digital transformation strategy is, and ask them if they've got one, as well as how you can get involved. Or better yet, you know, come up with some ideas. If you can come up with a handful of ideas and then take that to your leadership team and say, hey, have we thought about doing this? They may be ideas that they've already thought of, or they may say, you know what, let's explore that a little bit further. If you're a publicly traded company, you know, you can look at the 10K, see what your executives are saying, see what the board members are saying about your digital strategy. I'll turn it over to Rick and see what other ideas you've got.
Yeah, Rick, any comment?
No. Thank you. Thanks, Vid. No, I agree with the comments Vid made. I'd say, number one, lean in, right? I really, truly believe that IT needs a seat at the table, at that strategy planning table. I think it starts with understanding the business goals of that company. but also understanding the landscape in the industry. And I think that IT executives can actually look at competitors of their company, peers in their industry, and see what's happening, right? See what's happening and get some additional context. And to the point about bringing ideas, I think you can get a lot of great ideas there. Also, knowing the estate that you have and knowing the capabilities for expansion and further adoption and usage are so important as well. So know the capabilities of the estate that you're actually operating currently. I think is very important. But I think it starts with leaning in and asking questions about what those goals and objectives are of the business. And with the leadership asking simple questions like, well, how do you see technology playing a role in advancing these goals and objectives of the business?
You know, one thing I would add too, Vid and Rick, is Anoj earlier made the comment that, you know, we're entering what is kind of coined or termed the fourth industrial revolution. And what's interesting about that is if we think about it, we are in, you know, uncharted waters. And I think now more than ever is when organizations and individuals like this particular gentleman, this is when they should lean on partners, people who are more equipped at doing this, and they've done it a few times, even just to get information. I think that, you know, a very interesting dynamic is, you know, there's not a lot of information out there. There's not, like you said, you got to kind of hunt for it. Well, who best to get that information than organizations like Accudata who are routinely engaged in those conversations. So I think that would be another way to help that gentleman. So Anoj, I'm going to move on to another question.
By the way,
oh, sure, yeah, go ahead.
My real first comment was going to be call Cisco, call Accudata, call Xentaurs.
Right, yeah, exactly.
I didn't want to do too much self-promotion, so thank you.
No, not at all, not at all. Anoj, I'm gonna shift over to you. What percentage? This is another question from the audience. What percentage of companies are hiring and building departments around development versus outsourcing everything?
So I'm going to shift a little bit on that question because I don't know what percentage. I'm not nearly as good at numbers as Rick obviously showed us in the beginning. He's the master there. So I'm going to leave the numbers up to him. But I will tell you, every company that we talk to today is looking at becoming a digital company, right? Like Vid was talking about earlier on. It's bubbling up and penetrating into every industry. I think there's a statistic out there that JP Morgan Chase has more developers than Google and Amazon. Right. So ultimately, they are a software company who specializes in finance. Right. And we're seeing this huge shift with every company to do that. And so when you ask, it's really who and what kind of, you know, just to Rick's point earlier, what kind of technology can help drive the outcomes that you want, I think is a more important question. Companies will consistently build their own departments, outsource some, and you'll see a constant shift going back and forth from building to outsourcing. As things become more commodity and commoditized, they will outsource that. For the market differentiating stuff, they will build that themselves. But what is a definite thing is every single company will have to be is on the internet, right? Okay,
there we go. Sorry, Anoj, I think we lost your audio there just for a second, but you came back, so no problem at all. So what we'll do here, since we're coming up on the top of the hour, I want to just shift to one last question. So Vid and Anoj, I'm gonna direct this at you. Vid, we'll start with you. What's the question from the audience is, what's something I can do tomorrow to start going digital? So Vid, how about that?
Yeah, no, great question. I would say, you know, Anoj mentioned consumer experience to start off. I mean, you look at your, you know, how do you interact with different businesses in your consumer world, and put yourself in the eyes of a consumer and say, if I was a consumer doing business with my organization today, how would I want to interact? How would I want to be able to, you know, work with that company? And if you're looking internal, look at some of the processes that you have in place today that can be automated. What are things that are repetitive, things that take a lot of manual effort, and find ways to automate that. And those are a couple of things where I would say, you know, good place to start with going digital. I'll turn it over to Anoj for some other additional thoughts.
Yeah, Anoj, chime in. What are your thoughts?
Sure, and a lot of times when we think about digital, we think about things like mobile applications, et cetera. But think about the information that your company has gathered, right, over the years of doing business. And a lot of folks are sitting on this treasure trove of data, and they can monetize that data, right? So we're helping a company in kind of the East Coast, their health information exchange. And what they've realized is they gather data from providers, hospitals, doctors, et cetera, and then they provide that to payors, which are insurance companies. And they've realized, wow, we've been sitting on this treasure trove of data. We can go to an insurance company and say, do you want to build a better risk pool? Because we've got data from 30 insurance providers over 30 years, and we have better tools to dissect that data for you. And so monetizing that data, being able to monetize that information that they've gathered in years and years of being a business are other places to look.
Okay. No, that's great. Well, unfortunately, I know we could probably, all of us could go on another 30 or 40 minutes on this topic, but we've run out of time. We've come to the top of the hour. So that's all the time we have for today. I want to thank all of our participants and everyone on our panel for joining us today. And I would just remind everyone, if you have further questions, feel free to submit those. We'll respond after the webinar. And then also, if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to us at Accudata Systems. We're always available and happy to help. And so that's all. So thanks, everybody, and have a great day.
Thank you, Patrick.
You bet. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you. Take care.